Okay. Okay.
All the other men.
Right.
Don't include women in that category.
No, I need their votes.
Yeah. Need to be up.
Right. Not. Right.
Good evening. I'd like to welcome everybody to the candidate forum for tonight. The first candidates that will be that have been seated, that are seated, are all running unopposed. We're going to give them 2 minutes each to tell us about yourselves. The first one is Mary Gaskell. She's the Iowa House candidate for District 81. Greg Kenning and Jerry Parker, both are candidates for the Wapello County Board of Supervisors. Lisa Kent is candidate for Wapello County Recorder. Gary Oldenburger is not here tonight.
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry, you're out of place. No, you're not. Okay. Gary Oldenburger is candidate for Wapello County Attorney, and Roberta Roth Neff is candidate for Wapello County Treasurer. You each have 2 minutes. Our recorder, our typist is over here, and she will give you a 10 to 30 second warning and a 10 second warning.
Okay. Then we want to get started again with Ms. Gaskell.
Thank you. I'm Mary Gaskell, candidate for District 81 State Representative, and I represent the Ottumwa Agency and Eldon areas in Wapello County. Thank you to the League of Women Voters for this forum. And thank you to our participating in the election process. I have a few things that I wanted to tell you about what I plan to do this next session. I want to raise the minimum wage, target state incentives to small businesses to retain and create good jobs, expand job training opportunities for workers who need to upgrade their skills to land a good job, create new partisan partnerships between high schools, community colleges, and local businesses to create on-hands learning opportunities to better prepare students for future jobs and keep kids in Iowa. And I want to balance the state budget and create efficiencies in state government to target more resources for job training and education. I also want to encourage more production and use of renewable fuels and biofuels, wind and solar, and encourage more production and consumption of locally grown foods. And also ensure first-time farmers have the resources and support to be successful, and to make sure that seniors and disabled Iowans can access services in their homes instead of being sent to a more expensive facility. Then I want to ask the citizens to please vote. This is your voice for good government. I ask. And remember, if we do not have good government, the rich will take from the poor, and the strong will overpower the weak.
Thank you. Mr. Kenning?
Thank you, League of Women Voters, for this opportunity to reintroduce myself to the citizens of Wapello County. I'm Greg Kenning. I'm a candidate for the Board of Supervisors. I've been a lifelong resident of Wapello County and a longtime teacher in the schools here. My wife Miriam and I have just celebrated our 40th anniversary. We have 2 adult children, Ian and Sydney, and 2 adorable granddaughters. Miriam made me say that. I've been a member of the Board of Supervisors since 2007. And Jerry and I would probably agree. The role of supervisors requires many, many talents, and we have to wear many hats. Probably, though, he would agree, the most important thing we do is to become custodians of our county budget. We have to determine how much money it's going to take to operate the county, what services are needed, and that's a fairly big responsibility. Through hard work and diligence and the support of our other department heads, we have been able to do this by really flatlining our tax askings. This past year was less than the year before. So we've done a pretty good job of being those watchdogs of the budget. But that doesn't mean that the county has remained stagnant in that time. Since I got on this board, we have been able to reconstruct a bridge at Chillicothe, partner with Indian Hills to bring a Job Corps into Wapello County. We've been able to resurface and repair some of our dilapidated bridges and roads around the area. And we've also been able to add 2 new needed departments to the county, the GIS department and our technology department. I will conclude by saying that it's going to be a challenge to do this in the future. But I look forward to serving Wapello County for 4 more years. And please, everybody, vote. And remember, you can vote for 2 supervisors.
Thank you. Mr. Parker?
I'm Jerry Parker, candidate for Wapello County Board of Supervisors. I'd like to thank the people of Ottumwa and Wapello County for allowing me to serve as long as I've served. My first election was in about 1972. Some of the people that voted for me then are no longer with us, and some of you weren't even born back then. So I'm the luckiest guy in Wapello County to have been able to serve that long in a variety of positions. I was first elected to the Ottumwa Riverfront Commission. I served a term there. I served 4 terms on the Ottumwa City Council, and it was different then. It was full-time city councilman. It was a real learning opportunity. And then I served 3 terms as the mayor, which was a full-time mayor for the city of Ottumwa. We didn't have a city administrator. I served 2 terms on the Sunny Slope Board of Trustees. I kind of took some time off. And now I'm serving my 4th term, ending my 4th term as a Wapello County Board of Supervisor member. I'm chairman of the Emergency Management Commission. I'm chairman of the Southeast Iowa Response Group. I'm chairman of the the Soap Creek Watershed Board. I'm an officer on the Juvenile Detention Board. I'm an officer with the Southeast Iowa Crime Commission, and I serve on the 8th Judicial District Board. That's the working part of it. I'm very fortunate in that my fellow board members have allowed me to be the representative for Wapello County and working with Indian Hills to bring Job Corps here. Having said all that, that's probably not what my legacy will be. None of those things. My legacy will probably be determined because there was a storm a couple years ago and Chief Wapello blew off of the courthouse. The board members allowed me, Steve and Greg allowed me to take the chief around in the parades and give speeches at all the grade schools. So now when I go anywhere in public and the kids point at me, that's the guy. He has Chief Wapello. So that's what my legacy will be. And I want to thank you for letting me share my history with you. And whatever the future holds, I hope I'm a part of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Kent?
Thank you, and women voters, for hosting this forum. I am Lisa Kent, and I have been a recorder for the past 1.5 years. Prior to being elected recorder, I was deputy recorder and have worked in the office for nearly 12 years. I am seeking re-election, but I have a lot to offer with my experience and knowledge. Our office handles a variety of services, including birth, death, and marriage records, hunting and fishing licenses, boat and off-road vehicle registrations, and recording of real estate documents. We also accept passport applications. This is a new service that has been added since I became recorder. The recorder's office is constantly changing. We recently implemented a statewide electronic death registration system, which allows us to issue certified copies of deaths occurring anywhere in the state, not just our county. A statewide birth registration system is expected to be implemented sometime in the next year. This will allow us to serve residents of Wapello County more efficiently. To help adjust to these changes, I feel that you should always be willing to learn. I am currently enrolled in the Iowa County Recorder Association certification program. This is a 30-credit-hour training which covers areas such as leadership and ethics, open meetings and open records, communication and office management, among other topics. My goal is to ensure that the Recorder's Office offers all of our customers the best possible customer service every time, all the time. As an elected official, I owe that to the residents, taxpayers, and voters of Wapello County. Thank you for taking the time to vote, and I appreciate your support.
Thank you. Ms. Roth-Neff?
Good evening. I'm Roberta Roth-Neff. I'm running for Wapello County Treasurer. I am a native Ottumwan, and I'm married and have 2 grown sons. I obtained my accounting degree from Buena Vista University and have had several years of accounting and bookkeeping in the private and public sector. I've worked in the Treasurer's Office as deputy for 28 years under the direction of Diane Kiefer, who's retiring this year after 45 years. I don't plan to match her record. The County Treasurer's Office, I'm sure all of you have had contact with us. We have 2 departments. The Motor Vehicle Department handles registration, transfers, and licensing of all the vehicles and mobile homes in the county. We currently provide services 6 days a week. We have 1 gal at the DOT office on Saturdays, and then other than that, Monday through Friday. The tax department, of course, collects the property taxes. Once a month, by the 15th of the following month, we distribute the funds that we have collected to the schools, cities, townships, Indian Hills, and Wapello County, any of the taxing entities. A delinquent tax sale is held annually that we're responsible for, and there is continuous activity on that with the delinquent taxes. We collect all revenues for the county into the various departments and also are responsible for maintaining the county funds. Service to the public has always been a priority, and I will strive to continue to provide courteous and efficient service to you. I would like to point out that our office does not make the rules, we have to follow them. Laws are constantly changing, and our legislators keep us aware of those, the State Association of Counties, to educate the officials. There is an excellent staff of about 10 people. Half of those people have over 20 years experience, so experience is very on both sides of the counter. In conclusion,
Thank you. Mr. Oldenburger?
Thank you for having me here, and thank you everyone for attending. My name is Gary Oldenburger. I'm the Wapello County Attorney. I took over that position a couple of months ago. Prior to that, I was an assistant Wapello County Attorney, prosecuting crimes involving domestic violence, stalking, and sexual offenses. I obtained my law degree from Drake University, where I also obtained a Master's of Law degree with a focus on criminal law. Prior to going to law school, I served about 10 years on active duty with the United States Air Force. I began as an enlisted person and worked my way up the ranks, eventually becoming a commissioned officer. I worked in areas involving engineering, information technology, police work, and ran a budget office. Coming into the county attorney's office, I have a wide variety of leadership skills and an effective and efficient office, as well as the legal experience. My primary focus as the county attorney will be to provide victim-centered concern is to help people who have been victims of crime to recover from their losses where possible, and to find services that they need to help them through this process, whether that be counseling or any other type of service that they need. Hold people who have committed crimes accountable for what they've done. Where possible, focusing on rehabilitation of the offender, helping them to make the changes in their lives they need to make to stop committing crimes in the future, and especially for those who commit violent crimes and sexual offenses, to find ways to prevent them from harming additional victims in the future. And those will be my goals as your county attorney. Thank you.
I will take just a small little break for you guys to leave and for us to get to the next group. During this time, I just realized I didn't tell. My name is Beth Stagg, and I'm president of the League of Women Voters. The League of Women Voters' goal is always to educate the voters so that you can make the best decision. We also register voters, new voters. We go and talk to Indian Hill students. We talk to high school students. And some of us even get to talk to elementary kids about voting and the importance of voting. And I'm glad that you guys are all here because voting is important and you realize that. I think one of the candidates said it a little differently than I would have said it, is that if we don't have good government, it's because we don't vote. So, you know, I like those bumper stickers that say, if you don't vote, you can't complain, because that really is kind of, by not voting, you have taken away your own choice of who you want to see in, you still don't have anybody, in office. So the other thing the League of Women Voters does is we study things. Amongst the things that we're studying right now is water quality, and also voter fraud, electronic registration or computer registration, voter registration, women's health, mental health, and I think that's about it. So we do a lot of studies in terms of trying to figure out how we can best possibly change the course of things in politics. We are going to be seating the candidates for the House, the Senate. We're going to, I believe Larry Sheets has had car trouble, so we're going to change it up. We would have done the House. We're going to do the Senate now. The two candidates are Steve Siegel and Mark Shelgren. And as soon as they get seated, we will get started. The League does have a question that we're going to ask both the Senate and the representatives. I want to take this moment to say, if anybody still has a burning question that they haven't gotten written down, I have cards. I also need to explain that we do reserve the right to try to put similar questions together. We will try not to put questions together that really have two different parts to them. We also look at the questions. The League of Women Voters believes in civil discourse, so we're trying very hard not to get personal with candidates. I don't think that will help us decide who is the better person to vote for. So right now, we have seated our Senate candidates, and it's Mark Shelgren and Steve Siegel. Each candidate will make a 2-minute opening statement, and then we will read questions.
Okay. Mr. Shelgren, would you start?
Well, thank you very much. And I appreciate the opportunity to be here to explain what I do. I think in order to understand what I have accomplished over the last 4 years, we really need to understand why I'm motivated to do what I do. I grew up with a single father. My mother left when I was 3. We were very poor. I had the opportunity to live with my grandparents. My grandfather encouraged me to become a scientist, and I pursued that encouragement through school and had some incredible opportunities. I studied astrophysics and geophysics at the University of California, Riverside, and I was invited to come to Iowa, where I met a wonderful woman who was born and raised here in Ottumwa, Iowa, Janet Beisch. After meeting her, I explained to her how much I appreciated the state of Iowa and appreciated what we have here. I've had an opportunity to travel all over the world, and I think we often overlook what a wonderful place we really live in. That being said, I also had the opportunity to meet a group of disabled athletes, and they wheelchair rugby players. My background being in physics, I inquired to them what the biggest challenge for them was, and they said that the cobblestones, the cracks in the road for their wheelchairs was their biggest problem. And so I diverted my course in life, and I started making wheelchair components, and it has been a wonderful experience. I've had great opportunities. I have gone from someone who grew up poor and had the opportunity to earn my way in life because working hard and caring about other people. I made the decision 4 years ago that I was going to run for office because I wanted to make an opportunity to pursue the American dream. And I saw that for our children and our grandchildren. In 4 years, I have been guided by a couple basics. What's guided me as your senator has been my oath to the Constitution and has been making sure I'm a good steward of your tax dollars and there for our children and our grandchildren going forward. Thank you.
Mr. Segal?
Good evening. I want to thank you all for being here. I'm sure you have something more interesting to do, but you chose to be here, and I appreciate that. I thank the League for putting on this event, as they have so many times. Tonight, I want to focus on the real issues in this election. Senator Shelgren and I have very different visions of the future and how the Senate can help to make these visions come true. I believe that government can and must be a force for good in our society. Government's not evil. Government is us. And it needs to work for the good of all of us to improve our quality of life. In this, the wealthiest country in the history of the world, everyone should be able to live in dignity. Seniors should be able to remain in their homes as long as they realistically can and have the services to help them do that. They should be safe from sexual in residential care. State government can help to regulate nursing homes, especially those with problems. All of our children should get the best possible start by attending a public preschool. Our public schools should be adequately funded with the cost of living increase. Switching to a school voucher system would inevitably lead to huge inequities in the quality of education, with the rich attending top-notch private schools while the poor are left with what's left. All workers, including public employees, should have the opportunity to bargain collectively with their employer over the terms and conditions of their employment. The minimum wage should be high enough that no full-time worker should live below the poverty line. There should be no second-class workers in our state. We need to assure that all Iowans have affordable health care, including mental health. One of the legislators' greatest accomplishments in the past several years was the large expansion of Medicaid, giving health coverage to 100,000 Iowans. Iowa should have a fair tax system that does not have the wealthiest paying only 6% of their income to state and local taxes, while the poorest Iowans pay nearly 11% of their income to state and local taxes, as it is today. State government and our ag producers can work together to clean our waterways with a large enough state investment to truly make it happen. I have 18 years of experience as an elected official and a great deal of energy to work for you, and I humbly ask for your vote.
Thank you. We'll now have our first question.
The first question from the League. And I will say that both of you did receive this earlier and have had some time to think about it. And just for a little bit of background, the League of Women Voters of Iowa and Ottumwa have has had voting rights as its ongoing legislative priority. We are currently focused on modernization of Iowa's voter registration laws. League will urge the Iowa legislature to pass and the governor to sign a bill instituting an online voter registration. In 2014, the Iowa Senate passed an online voter registration bill, but it did not advance in the Iowa House. The question is, will you support legislation to allow Iowans to register to vote online? What actions would you take to ensure online voter registration becomes available to Iowa voters? Do I need to repeat that to you guys?
Okay, we'll start with Mr. Siegel.
Okay, well, I'm not a great techie with computer skills, but assuming that technologically this can be done in a safe manner, I'd support it 100%. I think we should make it easy as we can for people to register and to vote. And I'd be more than happy to sponsor or co-sponsor such legislation.
Thank you, Mr. Shelburne.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate the question. I would support online voter registration so long as it came with voter ID. And the reason for it is because we want to make sure that everyone who's eligible to vote has easy access to voting. We want to make sure that we're not holding anyone back or having a challenge or a threshold that's difficult for anyone to vote. But at the same time, we want to make sure that our voter integrity is the highest it can possibly be. That being said, a voter ID law would have to be joined with this, because we don't want to have a situation where we open the floodgates for everyone to register, but have serious questions about who should be voting. The challenge that we have also is that we've got a lot of people who come over here for school. We have people who come over here for social benefits, and they aren't necessarily citizens of Iowa. They might be citizens of the United States, but they're not citizens of Iowa. And when they're registered to vote in multiple places, it's difficult for the states to coordinate and make sure that they're only voting in one of those locations.
Thank you. Next question.
This question comes from Chuck Bates. And it is, what would you do if you are elected Iowa Senator to promote Iowa as a place to expand business and create good paying jobs? I'll repeat the question. What would you do if you are elected Iowa Senator to promote Iowa as a place to expand business and create good paying jobs?
Okay, we'll start with Mr. Shelburne.
Well, that's a great question, by the way. You know, for me, it's really easy because I made the decision to bring my business here. I moved my business from California to Iowa because I did it for love, to be blunt. I think it's a great state, and I fell in love with a wonderful woman. But you know, it has only been about 6 years ago when a wheelchair company contacted me. They were based out of Anchorage, Alaska, and they said, we would like to move our location someplace. And I said, I would love to have you come to Iowa. I love the state, and everything that we put out for our wheelchair company says, proudly made in Iowa, USA. But you know what? I then did some research, and I found out that our tax code and other issues made it difficult for businesses to be successful here. And so once we did research, we found out that Iowa wasn't the best place 5 years ago for a business to come to. It was a harsh realization for me because I love the state so much. So I made the decision that I was going to run for office and I was going to work hard. We need to keep our commitments to the people of Iowa with regards to taxation, because Iowa has come a long way in 4 years. And I would intend that for the next 4 years, we'll continue that progress. I can proudly say that Iowa is now considered one of the best places to have a business, but it wasn't when I first ran for office.
Mr. Siegel.
Well, I think we need to promote what we have. We have wonderful workers. We still have a great education system. We have a good infrastructure, but a number of these things are in jeopardy. I think our educational system has fallen behind in recent years. We need to put more money into our education system, emphasize science and technology more, and have the workers at the high school level, elementary, and even at the community college level ready to go for these jobs. Our infrastructure with our road situation the way it is a problem. We've got to have more money to put into our road system. Taxes, you know, I don't think are that great of an issue. Our corporate corporate income taxes are about in the middle of the United States. I'm not sure that's why entities go, because of taxes. They want to have quality workers. They want to have access to a market, and Iowa provides those.
Thank you. Next question.
What have you done to reduce the tax burden on your constituents? I'll repeat. What have you done to reduce the tax burden on your constituents?
Mr. Siegel.
Well, the Board of Supervisors, we pride ourselves on keeping our taxes low and also providing the services that we need and having sufficient employees to do them. Mr. Shelgren sent out a mailer earlier saying that the property taxes had doubled under my watch. Well, I've been in office 18 years, but they haven't doubled. They went up about 52%, which is less than 3% per year. Over the last 5 years, they've not gone up. So I think we've done an excellent job of holding the line without laying anyone off, still adding a few people to our payroll for positions that we needed. So I feel we've done a good job on the taxes.
Thank you. Mr. Shelgren.
Well, I have been one of the leaders in the state of Iowa to try to reduce taxes and burdens on Iowa businesses and individuals in the state of Iowa. My opponent said that he says our taxes are in the middle. That just isn't true. If you look at nonpartisan legislative mailers and information that's out there, we actually have one of the worst tax structures in the state, in the entire country. We have a 12% corporate income tax, maximum corporate income tax. No one else in this country has that high of corporate income tax. When I was first elected, I worked with or inquired to Rubbermaid on why Rubbermaid was leaving Centerville, Iowa. Rubbermaid made the decision to leave Centerville, Iowa because of taxation. They didn't go out of business. They went to Kansas, where they have a flat 4% taxation. Where Iowa does a really good job is with our insurance companies. Our insurance companies in Iowa had the tax lowered to a flat 5%, and they have become tremendously successful. And Des Moines has prospered because of that flat 5% tax structure. But the rest of Iowa businesses have not had that same benefit. So I have worked with that, and I've also worked with Governor Branstad to make the largest tax reduction for commercial property taxes in the state of Iowa's history. Thank you.
Next question, please.
This question is from Joe Helfenberger. What do you plan to do with state funding to at least temporarily backfill the multifamily property tax rollback to allow the local economy to grow and to fund basic services? Ottumwa has 1,100 multifamily units. I'll read it again. What do you plan to do with state funding to at least temporarily backfill the multifamily property tax rollback to allow the local economy to grow to fund basic services?
And we'll start with Mr. Shelgren.
Thank you very much. You know, the question comes down to that commercial property tax and the earned income tax credit agreement that was made between the House and the Senate. And I can tell you that I had supported the commercial property tax bill to lower taxes on businesses so we can create more jobs in the past. This was something that was done behind closed doors. Republicans and Democrats got together without going through the full committee process in order to do this. And what happened was in the very last minute, they put through an addendum to this tax structure, which hurt a lot of communities, Ottumwa included. The challenge that we're going to face going forward is that these communities, Ottumwa specifically, has built its tax base and tax revenue to such a level that it needs those property taxes across the board. We are backfilling at the state level all of the commercial property tax to this point. This is an area that was thrown in the last minute and is not backfilled, and I would expect that we would work with the city, but I would not backfill this part completely. I think it's something we need to have some shared burden between the taxpayers of the entire state of Iowa and the community of Ottumwa.
Thank you, Mr. Siegel.
Well, as Senator Shelgren said, this deal kind of occurred behind closed doors, and from my understanding, it was a trade-off that the Republicans insisted on having the multi-residential tax cut in exchange for Medicaid expansion. which I've already said was one of the top accomplishments. Not only does this not guarantee that renters get any tax reduction or reduction in their rent, but I don't know how you consider apartments to be residential tax. They're a profit-making business. So I would try to repeal it. If that were not successful, I would certainly try to backfill it because I know it's going to cause a lot of pain for local government. And it's an example of how things done behind closed doors don't always work out very well.
Thank you. Next question.
Next question is submitted by two people, Thomas Box and Donna, I'm sorry, I can't read your last name. The question is, on TV ads, Senator Shelgren, it says you claimed homestead for 2 homes. Where is your other house, and doesn't the state keep track of homestead claims?
Do you want Steve to answer that first, or would you like me to answer it directly?
You were to be first, is it all right?
My question, okay, my turn. All right. Well, I don't know how it happened or whatever, but I noticed that Mark did claim homestead exemption in Benton County along with Wapello County and has been for the past 8 years. It says right on it when you sign the form that you agree you don't have another place in Iowa or any other state where you're claiming a homestead exemption. So I just know it happened. I don't know why. I don't know if there's a mechanism for counties to chat with one another, but when you get your tax statement, it clearly says there's a homestead exemption on there. I think most of you who own property are aware of that. So I don't really know how it happened. And there should be a way to cross-tab and make sure this doesn't happen where people claim 2 homesteads. You can't live more than 6 months of the year in 2 different places.
Mr. Shelgren.
Not a problem. And I appreciate the question. I came to Ottumwa in 2006. In 2006, when I came here, I brought my business, and I had an accountant who handled my tax work. It's interesting because I do an awful lot of work at the state level, but running 6 businesses, I have 2 accountants and 2 bookkeepers. To my knowledge, I got a phone call, or my wife got a phone call from the Benton County Treasurer and said they didn't know. They didn't know if this was true or not, but they said they got an anonymous phone call, and that if it was true, it was $807 total with penalties. So we said, well, that's fine. So we sent them a check and said, here's your $807. But I'll be honest, I don't know whether or not that was done or whether that was not done. We haven't had time to have our accountants actually go over it.
Okay, thank you. Next question.
This is directed to Mark Shelgren by Phil Taylor. The question is in regard to Steve Siegel's answers to your 2010 survey and a public statement that you made last year. Siegel's answers were obviously meant to be a joke, however, not a good one, in my opinion. Was your public statement comparing preschool education to fascism also a joke?
Fascism.
Thank you.
Okay, so there's a couple different questions there. One question had to do with the survey that I send out every year. My survey that I send out every year specifically asks individuals what's important to them. In this case, 4 years ago, I sent out a survey that said, with regards to abortion, are you pro-life, pro-choice, or undecided? My opponent, for whatever reason, sent back, kill them all and let God sort it out. He also sent back quite a few other comments in there, things like tax the rich, and he would take a chicken man sign in his yard, and a lot of petty little things. But that was what happened. And I made that survey public because, once again, it was sent to me directly, and I don't know what the motives behind it were. The question next was about whether or not I made comments about preschool and fascism. And the statement is, on the floor of the Senate, I did compare preschool with fascism because it was pointed out by a fellow senator. They asked the question, they said that China had a great program. And I said, actually, I don't want our preschools to be like the Nazis. I don't want our preschools to be like the communists. And I don't want our preschools to be like the Chinese, where they kill the little girls and they keep the boys. So I did. I was very blunt with that. Thank you.
Mr. Siegel.
Well, I got the survey from Mark 4 years ago, and obviously I didn't like the survey. I thought it was kind of wise guy questions because it was really very extreme answers. So I answered it wise guy back. Not a good idea. I've publicly apologized. I'll do it again tonight. I apologize to the voters and to Senator Shelgren. Bad idea. As far as, I believe he compared it to Nazi indoctrination. I don't know, the explanation I just heard doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Preschool is not a new concept in Iowa. I don't know that we've killed all the girls and kept the boys. I don't know where that idea got started, but that probably wasn't a very good statement either. And he has not apologized for it, nor for this homestead tax thing.
The next question comes from Gary Chedester. Why does Wapello County not have a full-time veterans office? Why does Wapello County not have a full-time veterans office?
And Mr. Siegel, we'll start with you.
Well, for many years, we had a 20-hour-a-week position. And I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, the legislature passed legislation, depending on the population of your county, with a minimum number of hours that the Veterans Affairs Office should be open. For our size, it's 30 hours. So we immediately went to 30 hours. And we've had, I don't know, 2 or 3 Veterans Affairs Commissioners since then. It's happened several times. Once the Veterans Affairs Commissioners get in office, then they decide they want it to be a full-time job. Now, when we went to 30 hours, that did make it full-time in terms of health insurance and benefits. And I'd be open to going to full-time now, but not with our current Veterans Affairs Director. There's some issues there. And we, the Board of Supervisors who make the decisions to finance these things, have no control, or very little control over his actions. So I would be happy to do it if we had someone in there that I felt confident in.
So here's the main problem we run into. 20 hours a week was the minimum before. It took the state legislature to mandate it being a minimum of 30 hours. My opponent stayed at the minimums. Because he didn't like the guy who was in there, he's punishing veterans. It's not our veterans' fault that there is somebody in that position that the county supervisors can remove from office if necessary. If he's not the right person, get someone in there. Our veterans deserve a full-time administrator who's there to help them with their needs. They've earned that. They don't need the bare minimum for the county of this size. Thank you.
Next question, please.
Next question comes from Miriam Kenning. Republicans like Governor Branstad, Joni Ernst, and allies at the Iowa Farm Bureau want to repeal environmental protections under the Clean Water Act. What is your position concerning the control of nitrates and other pollutants that end up in our rivers, streams, and wetlands?
Well, I don't know about where Joni Ernst, the governor, or Farm Bureau stands on those issues necessarily, because I'm not them. When I ran for office, I was very clear. I don't work for the Republican Party. I don't work for the Democrat Party. I only work for the voters of this district. So I can't speak for them. I can tell you that one of the things that I did do is I was the lead sponsor on taking our clean water initiatives from $10 million to $25 million. I worked on this with Senator Black, the Democrat Senate chairman for natural resources. He supported my amendment to increase the amount of money that we spend for water quality because it's an important issue for us. Nitrates in the water cost communities like Ottumwa a lot of money. And we need to make sure that we can do everything we can to support buffer strips and good farming practices, and also make sure that other avenues for clean water are pursued. Scientifically, I've worked with Iowa State in order to make sure that the nitrates that we put onto the fields can break down both because of temperature and because of time, so that the nitrates themselves aren't flushed into our water system and cause bigger problems. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Siegel.
Quickly on the last question, no, this Board of Supervisors cannot remove the Veterans Affairs Commissioner. That's up to the commission. And no, we are not punishing veterans. We've fully funded. No one's gone without who came to our office. On the water question, in 2013, Iowa established the nutrient reduction program, and it was up for a vote in the Senate 3 times. Now I'm talking about the bill that actually passed and was signed by the governor. Senator Shelgren voted no 3 times. In 2014, it came up again, also with an expansion that came up for 3 votes. Senator Shelgren was not present for any of those votes. So I don't know what he thinks, but on the bill that counted, he wasn't there or voted no. So I, on the other hand, think we need to expand it greatly. I think water quality is a major issue in Iowa, and the farmers, the ag community wants to work with us. They want to cost share on these items. We should do that.
Thank you. Next question.
Where do you stand on property taxes? Is a question from Bill Kavanaugh. Where do you stand on property taxes?
Mr. Siegel.
I'm not quite sure what the question is. Where do I stand on property taxes? Well, that's the primary financial, where local governments get the bulk of their money. You know, if we wanted to develop some other source, we could look at that. But property taxes, as I stated, in Wapello County, we've kept them down, particularly the last 5 years. Now, we don't control the city's taxes. We don't control the state's taxes, but we try to keep them affordable for people. I don't see them disappearing anytime soon, so the best we can do is try to keep them as low as we can, and that's really up to local government as to what they want to do with their property tax levels.
Thank you.
No, I represent 4 counties. I represent Wapello County, Jefferson County, Van Buren County, and Davis County. I also have in the past represented Appanoose County and Wayne County. Wapello County has the highest property taxes of any of those counties. The challenge that we run into is that we have a dissimilar system. We have a different proportionality for property taxes for farms, for residential, and for commercial industrial. What we really need to be doing is making sure that we get those property taxes in line. When I was first elected, I swore an oath to the Iowa Constitution. It said that businesses for profit should not be taxed at a different rate than individuals. Yet we broke that apart years ago. It's time that we get it fixed. And with the latest property tax reductions for commercial property tax, we actually move in that direction to get things back in line where they should be. It takes fiscal discipline, whether you are somebody who's working at the state level, or whether you're a supervisor, or whether you're somebody at the city level, to make sure that you're not spending more money than's coming in. It's not fair, because when you fail to keep your commitments, it falls back on the taxpayers to make up for those commitments that you failed to keep.
Thank you. Next question.
The next question is from Miriam Kenning, and it is, with the crumbling infrastructure and the need to improve our roads, bridges, and culverts, what is your stand on increasing the gasoline tax? There has not been an increase since 1989. I'll read the question again. With the crumbling infrastructure and the need to improve our roads, bridges, and culverts, what is your stand on increasing the gasoline tax?
Well, I can tell you directly, my stand on increasing the gasoline tax has been no in the past. And the reason it's been no in the past is because there's a formula out there called the Time 21 formula. The gasoline tax increase goes to fill in the Time 21 formula, which predominantly benefits Des Moines and Cedar Rapids. So instead of increasing the gas tax, which increases the amount of money that the government takes from its citizens, I proposed and I submitted a bill which would have given $200 million from the general fund to the counties. As a matter of fact, it would have trusted the county supervisors to spend that money on infrastructure. $99 million was used, $1 million per county. So each county, which has roughly the same area, could use that money. The other $101 million was broken down by population. So Wapello County would have received about $2.5 million every year, also adjusted for inflation, going up with inflation, so that we can control infrastructure and we can control the roads. And it would have given that discretion to local leaders, because I trust them with those decisions. And as voters locally, you can hold them accountable better than they can at the state level.
Mr. Siegel.
Well, I actually agree to some extent with what Mark just said. The times 21 formula is not fair to rural counties, and that's something that needs to be re-examined. His plan that he just discussed has some benefits, but I'm not sure where the 200 million or 250 million a year would come from year after year. Right now we have it, but at the state level, but I don't know where that would come from. Whether or not, nobody likes tax increases, but it's something we're going to have to look at. But I'm thinking the gas tax is regressive, the sales tax is regressive. I could see us raise one, lower the other, so the net impact would be nothing on people, have it revenue neutral. But we also need to, Representative Hansen discusses this a lot. A lot of cars don't run much on gasoline anymore. So we need to find a way to have those folks that drive electric cars and hydrogen and whatever pay their fair share of the maintenance for the roads as well.
Thank you. We were just checking our time out. Ready for another question?
One last question.
No, we're going to 8:15. Okay.
Okay.
Maybe not the last question.
We should have
From
two.
Phil Kavanaugh.
Yep.
What are you and your family doing to invest in your community at the present time?
Repeat.
What are you and your family doing to invest in your community at the present time?
And Mr. Shelgren, I believe you were the one last speaking, weren't you? No, Mr. Siegel.
I answered the
Okay, then you,
last one second, so.
so you do this one first.
Okay. Well, me and my family don't have a whole lot of money, and I don't own any businesses, but I try to make as many of my purchases as I can here in Wapello County, which is most of them. And I support Wapello County restaurants and so on. So that's what I do.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Shelgren?
Well, my wife and I are very blessed. We've worked hard, and we have 6 companies. We have 21 employees. The primary company most people are familiar with was a company called Frog Legs, which makes wheelchair components at the Ottumwa Airport. We have Physics Manufacturing, which is a machine shop and a urethane company out at the Ottumwa Airport. I have patents on multiple things, including military armor to help protect our soldiers in theater. And recently, my wife and I also purchased a Central Massage and Spa, both here in Ottumwa, Iowa, and also in Bloomfield, Iowa. As active participants in the community, it matters to us. Recently, I had a conversation with my kids when we were traveling, and they said, you know what? We love our community. We love our home. When can we get back to Ottumwa? And so my son plays football. My daughter plays volleyball. My other daughter and my son-in-law works at John Deere. My grandkids go to school here. We love this community. And I can tell you quite bluntly, I was surprised in the primary when my opponent says that his kids don't actually care much for Ottumwa because they're bored when they come home. There's a difference. We love this community and we invest in this community because we believe in it.
Thank you. Next question.
This question comes from David McKenzie, and it's in regards to the Second Amendment. What are your feelings on the castle doctrine or the right to use force to defend yourself against an intruder? I'll read it again. What are your feelings on the castle doctrine or the right to use force to defend yourself against an intruder?
Well, the castle doctrine is an interesting bill. I know because I wrote it and ran it in the Senate. I believe strongly that we have a right, matter of fact, not just a right, we have a responsibility to defend property and defend life. Matter of fact, the Iowa Constitution says in Clause 1, it says we have a right and expectation to protect life and defend property. That being said, if there is never a fear that someone will protect their home, then people out there who have ill intent or bad intent to you and your family will be emboldened. It is important that our right to bear arms never be compromised. Beyond that, the Second Amendment was put into the Constitution because it is the enforcement clause. It says that all of these other rights from the Bill of Rights and from our Constitution will be enforced by a society of like-minded people who will make sure that our liberties and our freedoms are not wasted. Thank you.
Mr. Siegel.
Thank you. First, I'd like to say my children are not running for the Senate, so I guess they're free to go wherever they want. As to this question, maybe 2 years ago, there was an inmate escaped, I believe, from the Clarinda prison, and he broke into a home. It was an elderly couple, and he threatened them and so on, but the man went and found a gun and shot the guy in the house, and that was considered legal under Iowa law. Now, I'm not sure what this Castle Doctrine would do to change that, but we also had an incident, I believe it was in Detroit not too long ago, where a young woman was in trouble and ran up to the porch of a house and knocked on the door and got shot and killed. You know, I don't want to see that sort of thing happen. I think if someone's in your home, you have every right to do whatever you want to do to defend yourself. Beyond that, I'm not certain we want to expand that.
Thank you. Next question.
The next question was submitted by Mike Gass. Where do you stand on a worker's right to collectively bargain with their employers for better pay, benefits, and safety in the workplace? I'll read it again. Where do you stand on a worker's right to collectively bargain with their employers for better pay, benefits, and safety in the workplace?
Mr. Siegel.
I fully support the right of workers to collectively bargain with their employer, including public employees. I know the senator doesn't agree with that, as he's introduced legislation to change it. But a worker is a worker, and I worked for AFSCME for 20 years representing public employees, and I saw how a lot of them are mistreated at times. I know ISEA does the same sort of work, Teamsters, numerous unions. Workers have rights, and they need to have a mechanism to enforce them and have decency and a decent wage and so on the job.
Thank you, Mr. Shelgren.
Yes, thank you. Actually, I grew up in a union household. I told you I grew up with my single father, who was a carpenter. I was an apprentice carpenter when I was 18 years old, and I worked with the unions. I believe that we need to have a situation where we have an even playing field between businesses and unions. Iowa is a right-to-work state. It means you cannot be forced to join a union, nor can you be discriminated against if you choose not to join a union. But at the same time, people who choose to join a union or a workers' group should be respected. The difference is this. When I go up to Des Moines, okay, I don't choose sides. I don't choose businesses against labor, and I don't choose labor against businesses. I look at what our responsibilities are to make sure that all of our citizens are taken care of and treated correctly. I don't because the Constitution says there's no special class of citizens. I don't treat anyone in this district better or worse because of who they are or what group they belong to. I try to treat everyone with respect. We need to be wearing black and white stripes, not red and blue stripes. Thank you.
Next question comes from Melinda Jones. When it comes to our firefighters' pensions, would you vote for or against a defined contribution plan? When it comes to our firefighters' pensions, would you vote for or against a defined contribution plan?
Mr. Shelgren.
Well, this one's really easy. I actually was one of the few Republicans to support this. I actually supported the 411 plan, voting for it because I believe strongly that when we give our word, even though I wasn't there when that word was given, it's important to me that government keep its word, whether that be to seniors or to children or to firefighters or to teachers, it doesn't matter. When we give our word, we should keep it. And I can tell you in the past, they have failed to uphold their commitment to fully fund those pension plans, and I think that's wrong. So I fought for the unions to make sure that their pension plans were fully funded.
Mr. Siegel.
Well, I fully believe, firefighters don't get Social Security. Those pensions are all they have. And I fully believe they should be a defined benefit plan as they have been all along, rather than a defined contribution plan. I find the senator's comments a little puzzling because he introduced legislation to eliminate that. He also introduced legislation to eliminate Chapter 20, which is the public employee collective bargaining law. I guess you can be on both sides of the issue, but I'm not sure how that works in practice.
Well, if that's a question, Chapter 20, what Chapter 20 really is it defines All right. If you don't want to know, that's fine.
Mr. Siegel? No, where am I?
I think we're done with that.
We're done. I'm sorry, I got sidetracked. Another-
I just answered it.
Okay. Next question.
Next question is from Mike Dalby. What will you do to improve our public education system?
Okay. Mr. Siegel?
Well, I think making the first thing we should do is make public preschool education available to every 4-year-old in Iowa whose parents want them to go. I think numerous studies have shown that gives children a real leg up and would be the best thing to do. Second, I don't think we should be starving our public schools. As far as I know, Senator Shelgren has never supported in his 4 years there an across-the-board increase in allowable growth. Cost of things go up, we got to have more money. I'm not for opening the door, give them whatever they want, but I think we've got to have reasonable growth for education. Thirdly, I think we need to work really hard to make college affordable, more affordable than it is. And I think the General Assembly's done a good job, including Senator Shelgren, in the last 3 years of freezing tuition at our public universities. So I think we need to try to continue on that track.
Thank you, Mr. Shelgren.
Well, I'm a member of the Governor's STEM Council. My background in science has given me the opportunity to work with teachers and work with the education facilities in general. I've also helped with the community college and the universities, as my opponent has pointed out. We have a huge opportunity in Iowa to have the best educated kids in the world. But we have to hold them account. We have to hold the education establishment accountable. When I was first elected, we were in the middle of the pack as far as education goes, and we were one of the places that most teachers said, we don't get paid enough, we don't get treated well enough. Recently, it was pointed out that Iowa has been ranked the 10th best place for teachers to work in the country. It's the 10th best now. We've done a lot of work with that. I did work with Governor Branstad on his reforms for education, and I supported some of those reforms, but not all of them. What do I think? I think we need to make sure that education is about the kids and not about the establishment.
Next question comes from Jose Uribe. Politicians don't seem to have to play by the same rules that ordinary people do. They don't pay their fair share in taxes. They don't follow the same laws, and they don't even do the jobs we elected them to do. What should make us think you are different? I'll read it again. Politicians don't seem to have to play by the same rules that ordinary people do. They don't pay their fair share in taxes. They don't follow the same laws, and they don't even do the jobs we elected them to do. What should make us think you are different?
Mr. Shelgren.
Thank you very much. Well, I can tell you one thing is I didn't go up to Des Moines to be liked. I didn't go up to Des Moines to fit in with the political class. When I made my oath to the Constitution, I talk about that a lot, it says there's no special class of citizens. It means that if you are the governor of the great state of Iowa, or you are someone who's homeless, you are treated the same. You are given the same level of respect and the same level of dignity when dealing with issues and problems. That's the way it should be. I have supported cutting the pay of legislators. I have supported cutting the benefits of legislators. Because you know what? This should be a service. This should not be a way of life. This should not be a lifestyle. Okay? Where my opponent is more interested in sometimes in raising his own pay, I don't think that's appropriate. I think we need to make sure that a public servant really is there to serve the public and not there for their own self-serving needs.
Thank you, Mr. Siegel.
Well, that's interesting. Many folks in the legislation, I believe the senator, would like to see state employees pay 20% of their health insurance premiums. Now, there have been a handful of state legislators who have voluntarily done that on their own. To my knowledge, Senator Shelgren is not one of them. Myself, on the other hand, on 2 different occasions, we voted for raises. The law has changed now, but several years back, we really had to take this recommendation that came from the compensation board and lower it by a like percentage for everyone. So if we wanted to give our other employees raises, we had to give ourselves a raise. But on 2 occasions, I've written checks back to Wapello County and paid my raise back in. So it's one thing to talk the talk, you gotta walk the walk.
Yeah, thank you.
The next question comes from Tom Lazio. What specifically would you do to improve finances to Iowa cities? What specifically would you do to improve finances to Iowa cities?
Mr. Siegel?
Well, I think we've talked about one of those things already, which is this multi-residential property tax reduction that was enacted in the dead of night, behind closed doors, whatever. We really need to take another look at that because that's creating a major problem for all local government, but I think cities more than counties. It's going to impact the county, but I think this impact on the city is 4 or 5 times as great. So I think we need to take another strong look at that one. Beyond that, I guess I'm open to hearing what the cities themselves would like to do to improve their finances. I don't have any specific suggestions other than that one at this time.
Thank you. Mr. Shelgren?
Well, I talked earlier about trust. It comes down to a situation where I don't believe that when I go to Des Moines, I should micromanage the city leaders. I don't think I should micromanage the county supervisors. I want to return the money back to the taxpayers at the local level so that they can hold the mayor in this case accountable or the county supervisors accountable. And so when it comes to roads, that's why I take money from the general fund and give it directly back to the communities. When it comes to education, we want to give the money directly back so that it can be spent at the local level and they have control over it at the school board level. There's a lot of things that we can do, and as opposed to making a one-size-fits-all for 99 counties and a multitude of cities in the state of Iowa, we need to make sure that money is returned back to them so that they can make the best decisions. Once again, it comes down to accountability. I'm going to jump to one other thing also as I still have time. My opponent didn't know what Castle Doctrine did. What Castle Doctrine says is that when someone attacks you in your home, you may be able to defend yourself, but they won't be able to sue you and take everything you have, even though they're the ones who broke the law.
Mr. Siegel?
That was during my time.
What?
Yeah.
You already answered that one?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry.
This next question comes from Gary Chedister. How do you plan to keep the water quality in Iowa secure and safe? For instance, I would add to that, I just heard on the national news broadcast that Splenda has been found in rivers, streams.
That's not that question. Got to ask their question.
How do you plan to keep the water quality in Iowa secure and safe?
Well, we have a few different ways to do that. I mean, when you talk about Splenda, I don't know if that was part of the question or if that was just something that was added on. I have actually worked, my background is in astrophysics and geophysics. As somebody who knows a lot about geophysics, I also know a lot about the aqua cycle and how water and different chemicals move through the cycle and move through the soil. First and foremost, working with Iowa State, we are working on plans right now in order to change the way that applications are made to fields. And in changing those things, we make sure that the chemicals aren't staying on the fields as long, and so they can be I guess they break down by natural biodegradable processes at a quicker rate. The next thing you need to do is make sure you hold manufacturing companies accountable. I have a manufacturing company. I want to make sure that we only have the highest level of integrity with regards to those things. And if a company is dumping chemicals into a river, or if you have Splenda, as you said, in the water systems, we need to make sure that that's taken care of. The nice thing about it is we have 2 great universities who do a lot of water testing in this state. And we have a lot of people who volunteered their time to actually take water samples to make sure that their community's water is safe.
Mr. Siegel?
We've already talked quite a bit about the nutrient reduction program, which is aimed at agriculture. But I agree that in industry and us create or add to the problems. So I think Ottumwa and many other cities are going through major reforms of their sewer systems, which is very expensive and painful. But it's something that we need to do. The other thing that I think really impacts water quality, and you don't think about it that much, but is flooding. When we have floods, bad things happen. The water gets up into various areas where it normally doesn't get and puts that into the rivers and creeks. I think there are a number of things we can do to reduce flooding damages. SIDCA, for example, which I serve on the board of, builds waterways as alternatives to bridges and keeps the water from getting into the rivers when it's high. I can't think of the group. Jerry's on the board, but we a nearby creek here that we've put a lot of money into building ponds, collect water so it doesn't flood.
We're going to start our last question this time.
This question is from Susan Jettis. How do you feel about abortion?
And it's Mr. Siegel, right?
Well, it's a controversial subject, as we all know, as I've learned recently. But I believe abortion, along with other forms of women's health, should be between a woman and her physician to make the decision what to do with her own body. We had a bill last year, which I believe the senator signed on to, a constitutional amendment for a personhood amendment, which I'm not saying it would, but analysis I've read say it could make the pill, IUD, and a variety of birth control forms illegal. I don't think we need anything like that. I think people have the right to do what they want with their own bodies.
Mr. Shelgren?
Thank you for the question. I can tell you where I feel personally, I am pro-life. I believe that innocent children should be protected if possible. But I can tell you that as a legislator and as somebody who has sworn an oath to uphold the law, the Supreme Court made a ruling called Roe versus Wade quite a while ago. I've read through that ruling in depth because it was important to me to understand exactly what the law of the land was. And what it said was, it said that states have a responsibility to take care of the health of the mother and the health of the child, and that up to the point of viability, they defer to a woman to choose. At the time that was done, viability was 24 weeks. That means a child surviving outside of the womb. With current technology, it's now 20 weeks, but we have not updated our laws. In the cases of rape and incest and the life of the woman, I trust that the doctor and the woman should make those choices because that's what the law says. And my oath is to uphold the law, even though personally, I would encourage women to carry that child to term and allow another family to raise it if at all possible.
Thank you. Closing statements now, and we'll start with Mr. Siegel.
Well, I truly appreciate this opportunity that we've had tonight to talk about the issues that are going to affect Iowa in the future. I thank the League for putting on this event, as they've done so many times, so tirelessly. I'm asking you for your vote because I think it's important that we have, I've lived in this district for 40-some years, I've been involved in local government, I've reached out to the other counties. I know the supervisors and the elected officials in other counties. I would go out and meet with them on a regular basis and be in better touch than about what goes on in this district and what the people of this district need. So I would certainly appreciate your vote and your consideration on Election Day. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Shelgren?
Well, I would like to start off by thanking the League, and I'd also like to thank the voters of the district. For 4 years, you have trusted me to be in Des Moines working for you. And when I went up there, I had one primary goal, besides keeping my word and everything else, was that when I was done, I'd be proud of the job I did. It's 4 years later, I can tell you I'm very proud of the job I've done. And if you'd like me to continue working for you, I would do so happily. And if you choose my opponent, I would respect that decision. But I can tell you that my opponent has criticized me for not coming out and saying I'm a Republican. Well, you know what? I don't put it on my signs because I don't follow the lead of any group or any party. My opponent proudly puts Democrat on his signs. We all know where he stands. As a business owner, I know that if I have a challenge and I need something taken care of, I've got to go to Jerry Parker because Jerry Parker will work with me, and other business owners feel the same way. But they know that if they go to Steve, if you're not a Democrat, you're not a union member, need not apply.
Thank you. We'll now take a...
Thank you. for, thank you for agreeing to. We've had a change in our schedule. Originally, Mr. Sheets, Mr. Godby, and Ms. Vladeck were going to be appearing second on the agenda this evening. However, Ms. Vladeck was not able to make it because of a family emergency. Mr. Sheets had a car malfunction. We've all had those. His son came to bring him to the forum. I think that we'll take a short break, but Mr. Sheets and Mr. Godby will be appearing next on this agenda.
They have to do their.
Okay.
That's first.
We are going to commence with the House candidates. I think, as Jean told you, Deb Walalovic, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing it, is not here tonight, is not able to be here. Jared Godby is here, and Larry Sheets is here. We're going to begin with each candidate having a 2-minute opening statement.
Okay. Mr. Godby, we'll begin with you.
All right, my name is Jared Godby. I'm running as the independent candidate for District 80. I was born and raised in Moravia, Iowa. I'm a graduate of Iowa State University. I'm sure that might lose some votes with some Hawkeyes out there, but I hope you'll give me some points for bravery. I enlisted in the Iowa Army National Guard right out of high school, and I was activated during the floods of 2008, so I helped build a nice long wall up against the Mississippi down in Keokuk. Afterwards, I graduated from Iowa State, and then I was deployed to Afghanistan for about a year. And during that time, the federal Congress had a bit of a budget issue, and military went without pay for a couple of weeks. Now we had back pay, but it created some issues for people who were living paycheck to paycheck, who have family back home. For a single person, it wasn't as much of an issue for me, as food and shelter were covered as I was deployed, but for other people, it was a bit of an issue. So that's kind of one of the first things I noticed about the type of dysfunction that we kind of have in government at the moment. And after I graduated from Iowa State, I decided to take a look at how government kind of works from the inside. So I applied as a clerk at the State House and worked there under Representative Pat Grassley, and was also secretary of the Ag Committee. So I got to see up close Ag Committee process and the House process. And as far as patching budgets, there was a similar problem in the House where it took far too long at the state level. Even it wasn't quite as bad as the federal level, where they don't pass it at all, but they pass it much later than they normally do. And after that, I went out and worked in the federal government, and I worked for Senator Grassley, and the government shut down, and a similar thing happened where we went a couple of weeks without pay, and that hurt even more people during that time in the wider federal government. And so that's the type of thing I want to change here at the state level, is try to get us talking and working together again.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Sheets?
Yeah, I'm Larry Sheets. My wife Carolyn's in the audience. We have 8 young children from 10 to 22 years of age. I served as a member of the Moulton Udell School Board. I was on President's Advisory Board at Judson University, on the Hope Pregnancy Center Board, Indian Hills Sustainable Agriculture Board, and the Christian Education Chairman of my church. I also have accepted a conservation award for planting 120,000 hardwood trees in a riparian buffer on my farm. My job experience began as an AFL-CIO hod carrier, which is the guy who carries the mortar up for the bricklayers. It's a very difficult job. My next job involved night shift work at a refractory, which is where they make bricks for steel mills. Then I was a research assistant at Purdue University, and later a member of technical staff at Bell Laboratories, where I worked on with the top secret encryption classification to try to prevent the Soviets from spying on our radio communications, and then followed it up with work on a 4,000-mile system that AT&T had that was the basis of what the internet started on. It was called the Data Phone Digital System. And then I was a member of the Bell Laboratories in Illinois as a distinguished member of technical staff involved with digital switching of those signals that we were talking about earlier. Then I worked for Rockwell International as the Director of Advanced Technology involved with artificial intelligence and very large-scale integrated circuits. Then moved on to be a Vice President, Chief Technical Officer of a company called Teltran that we took public with an IPO, and there we worked on intelligent network systems and elements. I was an adjunct professor at Midwest College of Engineering, teaching engineering, an adjunct professor at Illinois Institute of Technology, teaching business, an adjunct professor at Judson University, Illinois, teaching software. I've been an Iowa tree farmer from 2000 to 2012, and lastly, I've been an Iowa State representative for District 80 for the last 2 years. My education includes a BSEE at Purdue, an MSEE at University of Michigan, an MBA at Illinois Institute of Technology.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
First question, please.
From the League of Women
Oh,
Voters.
Okay.
Is the League of Women Voters of Iowa and Ottumwa have voting rights as its primary legislative priority. We're currently focused on modernization of Iowa's voter registration laws. League will urge the Iowa legislature to pass and the governor to sign a bill instituting online registration. In 2014, the Iowa Senate passed an online voter registration bill, Senate File 2278, but it did not advance into the Iowa House. The question is, will you support legislation to allow Iowans to register to vote online? What actions would you take to ensure online voter registration becomes available to Iowa voters?
Okay, and Mr. Sheets, we'll start with you.
All right. Well, online voter registration, there's a problem with its timing, and it's become a partisan issue, which is a little out of bounds, I think, here for this. But let me explain what the risks are with this, okay? The president of the National Citizenship and Immigration Services Council, Kenneth Perkins, a union of thousands of federal immigration officers, said that this last Monday that the administration is planning a massive unilateral amnesty, and it will involve up to 34 million immigrant work permits and residency cards over the next 5 years. The problem with online voter registration is the only way that it can be accomplished is if there is an ID. And until we get a voter ID, either by way of license, a driver's license, or a free ID provided by the state, it's not the kind of thing that can be policed. And so that's my issue.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Godby.
I think it's a very interesting concept. I'll share a brief story with you. When I was training for the deployment in 2010, we were sent down to Mississippi, and that was an election year, and it was during an election period. Those of us who were already registered were allowed to vote, but the veterans who weren't were not able to. So an online registration would be very helpful for veterans who are either deployed or preparing to deploy. So it's beneficial in that regard, as well as just general ease of access for everybody else. Some of the main problems that I see with this is that when one registers, you typically, as Representative Sheets says, you typically need an ID or you sign a document. Being able to do that online is difficult to do. The only way to prove who you are online is to use some kind of information that's private to you, either your social security, driver's license ID, and those type of information. So the second concern would just be make sure that that information remains encrypted and is difficult for hackers or something like that to be able to access.
Okay, thank you. Next question.
This question comes from David McKenzie. What are your feelings on the Castle Doctrine on the right to use force to defend yourself against an intruder? I'll read it again. What are your feelings on the Castle Doctrine or the right to use force to defend yourself against an intruder?
And Mr. Godby?
I'm strongly of the belief that everybody has the right to defend themselves. The issue with home invasions is that you, as the defender of the home, you need to be able to identify whether or not it's actually a threat. Everybody who is authorized to carry a weapon in the government, whether you're military or your police, has to go through that type of training to be able to identify whether it's a threat to you or somebody in your home. Now, somebody who breaks into your home, it's obviously going to be a threat, and there's less issue there. As somebody mentioned before, if somebody runs up on your door just knocking on it, I don't think that you should have the freedom to just shoot through the door at anybody who's on your porch. So I think you'd have to be careful writing a law like that to make sure that it's restricted to, common sense type of defense.
Thank you. Mr. Sheets?
Well, I believe the house is the castle, but the moat isn't. And if someone's outside of the house, I don't believe you should be able to shoot. If you're in your house and someone breaks in, regardless of whatever law is passed, I would defend my wife and children at the risk of going to jail if it was against the law. I think we need to make it possible for fathers to protect their children and husbands to protect their wives.
Thank you. Next question.
How do you plan to keep the water quality in Iowa secure and safe? Is the question submitted by Gary Chedister.
Mr. Sheets?
Well, if the secure in that question is to keep it clean so that it's suitable for drinking, I think the riparian buffer system, which I've invested my time and energy into by planting that 120,000 hardwood trees, I think that's the best way of filtering out the water that comes off of farmlands. If it's secure because there's terrorists, I can't answer that because I don't know how it is our government's going to protect us if someone were to drop something into Rathbun Lake. So I can't answer the secure. But as far as keeping it clean from normal activities, I think the riparian buffer system and what's done that way is the way to do it.
Mr. Godby?
As far as security, you'd obviously want to make sure that you're testing as often as is practical to make sure that water quality remains drinkable and palatable. As far as maintaining the cleanness of the water, we would need to prevent the type of runoff that occurs that dirties our water to begin with. And as Representative Sheets mentioned, some of the ways to do so is to create a buffer zone. There are some other ideas such as no-till farming. And some of it, a lot of it just comes down to farming practices and understanding the land that you're farming. And I think most farmers here in Southern Iowa tend to have a good idea of what that is, and we tend to practice it pretty well. From what I could tell from the DNR's information, a lot of the problems with runoff tend to come from northern Iowa farms are a little flatter, and they're probably less used to using erosion control type system as we have been with our hills down in southern Iowa.
Thank you.
Next question comes from Trudy Cavanis. Do you support raising the gas tax?
And we'll start with Mr. Godby.
At this time, I don't, and the reason for that is that the gas tax is a tax that primarily places the burden on poorer people proportionally compared to those who are more affluent. And the reason that it does that is because poor or even more rural people have to purchase more gas to be able to go to their work or any activities. And people who tend to have more money are able to invest in newer vehicles that have lower gas mileage or are electric and don't require as much gas. So I would be more in favor of using funds out of the general fund and making sure that our counties have the money they need to repair county roads as well.
Mr. Sheets?
Yeah. The approach that I've taken and pushed for is to create a percentage at the time of enactment, I mentioned, the bill, to calculate what the percentage is that in pennies, we now have as a tax relative to the price of the gas that's in the pump. Make that a fixed percentage going forward. If that had been done 26 years ago, the amount of revenue that we would have gotten from the inflation of the price of gasoline, we'd have more than enough money to take care of things. If we took care of that now, we would then be looking after the future. And at that point, I think we could go back to the governor and the leadership in the House and the Senate and say, we need to pay for one-time expense for the neglect that's happened for our roads for the last 26 years. And use one-time money to correct the problems that exist now and ongoing use of percentage tax.
Thank you. Next question.
Next question is from Tom Lazio. What specifically would you do to improve finances to Iowa cities?
Mr. Sheets?
Well, the best way I could think of to improve finances for Iowa cities is to improve the economy so that the benefits of the economy can be shared by the cities and states and all the citizens. And so my approach is not an instantaneous solution, but my approach would be to take the 12% corporate income tax that we now charge corporations when our surrounding states go anywhere from 0 to about 8%, move it down probably around 6%, and attract businesses in that would hire, would create buildings, would create more property. That would take a longer time, but it would be more sustainable.
Mr. Godby?
Along similar lines, improving the economy would be preferable. One way to do that, and I think the most preferable way to do that, in my opinion, is to help businesses that already exist to expand in those areas. We talk a lot about trying to bring in businesses from outside the area or even outside of the state to try to bring them in using incentives or things of that nature. But I think if we use those funds instead to tax breaks on smaller and medium businesses that already exist here and allow them to hire more people or to give benefits to people who already work for them, then I think that would help to improve the finances of the cities and local areas.
Thank you. Next question.
This question comes from Mike Dalby. What will you do to improve our public education system?
And we'll start with Mr. Godby.
Well, I do a little bit of subbing during my campaign at my local high school, my alma mater there in Moravia. And I've definitely noticed that there's been a decrease in the quality of education that we get. I can't verify whether that's due to the type of curriculum that's created by the state or by the federal level. But I do know that a lot of it's due to the amount of administrative work that teachers now have to do as opposed to the amount of teaching. So the focus is on testing and on data collection compared to making sure that our children actually have the education that they need in order to improve and to have a good quality of life.
Mr. Sheets.
My main concern on education has to do with the small and rural schools, which seem to be at the greatest jeopardy of being closed. And we moved to Iowa. We fell in love with Iowa, the small schools and the way and the system that worked in small towns. They've been very effective for my kids. I've got a couple of kids that scored 35 on their ACT test. But what I've tried to do and what I will continue to do is to try to get the transportation costs that are used, that are spent at rural schools to be able to be compensated for, either by a local levy or by state, to bring it down to the cost of the average transportation costs of all the schools in the state. You take a small town like Moulton, it spends an inordinate amount of money just to get the kids to school. It should be spent in the classroom rather than at the gas station.
Thank you. Next question.
Next question comes from Melinda Jones. When it comes to our firefighters' pensions, would you vote for or against a defined contribution plan? I'll read it again. When it comes to our firefighters' pensions, would you vote for or against a defined contribution plan?
Mr. Sheets.
I agree with Mark Chugrin. For any group of people that have been promised a benefit when they join and put off other opportunities in their life because they decided to go with being a firefighter, I think that benefit should continue. I think it's perfectly reasonable for those people who are joining up now for there to be a difference as long as they know what the groundwork, what the rules are when they join. So I could be for both, and I'm sorry to have to sound that way, but I think if we promise something, we should deliver it. And if it's necessary to have just a payment plan rather than a benefit plan, then we can go with that for new employees.
Thank you. Mr. Godby.
I definitely agree that if the state's been promised something that we should carry through with that, and particularly when it comes to firemen and policemen, when their pensions are the only retirement benefits that they have because they won't get Social Security, that they need to be protected doubly so.
Thank you. Next question.
Question is from Jose Uribe. I will read it twice. Politicians don't seem to have to play by the same rules that ordinary people do. They don't pay their fair share in taxes. They don't follow the same laws, and they don't even do the jobs we elected them to do. What should make us think that you are different?
Okay, Mr. Sheets.
Yeah, I pay my taxes. My accountant includes the money that comes from the state for being a representative. So I don't really understand the question there. It may be somebody's drinking their own bathwater or something, but as far as having to be under the law, we're under the same laws as everyone else. The only law that I can think of that we're not under is if we're going to session or from session. I don't think that we can get a ticket in those cases because in the past it was abused to keep representatives from showing up if they were in the wrong party. But that's the only law that I think is different for a representative than anybody else.
Mr. Godby.
I agree that technically speaking, there's no legal benefit that legislators have over the regular population. However, I think the main issue here is that a lot of legislators have the benefit of being directly involved with the process of creating the tax code, and they know the type of loopholes or all the changes that are made, so they're more up to date on the information. They can use those to their advantage, whereas a regular person may not be paying quite as close attention as what a legislator would doing the job. So I think one of the things that could change is the legislator making sure that he communicates with his constituents about the opportunities that they might have or the changes that might be related to what the constituent needs to know. And I think that needs to occur a lot more than what it does right now.
Thank you. Next.
Last question is from Susan Geddes. What do you think about abortion? How do you feel about abortion?
And let's see, Mr. Godby, you would be first.
This is a very divisive issue, and personally, if I were in a relationship and the person who I was with happened to get pregnant and we weren't expecting a child, I wouldn't make the decision to do so, except in the case of the health of the mother. But as a legislator, I have to represent the people who elected me to that position. And because we're so divided on this issue, I would have a hard time justifying a law that would outlaw something that we can't agree should be outlawed yet.
Mr. Sheets.
My position is fairly clear. I'm on the board of a crisis pregnancy center. My wife is the director of one. I believe that the unborn are innocent, and it's the responsibility of men and women to protect the innocent unborn. I make one exception, and that's for the life of the mother.
Thank you. For our closing statements, we'll begin with Mr. Sheets.
If elected, I hope to accomplish the following: improve job opportunities in Southeast Iowa, reduce the income tax to make Iowa competitive, support rural and small schools, defend Iowa from federal overreach, support our First, Second, Fourth, and 10th Amendment rights, make government as close to the people as possible, defend family values and the value of life, and sunset rural improvement zones. Some of the main issues facing the state are employment, improving business climate, rural school survival, rural improvement zone sunsetting, and state funding of abortion. Common Core is also there on my list. A vote for me because I'm qualified, experienced leader in industry, education, community service, and in the legislature. I care very much about Southeast Iowa and my children's future here. I had a very rewarding career, so I don't want or need to be a career politician. I'm content to be a citizen legislator and serve my neighbors.
Thank you. Mr. Godby.
I think we all notice every election when we're deciding on who to vote for, we get those type of responses where we get a lot of promises from the candidates who are being elected. And what's at issue is when they get into office, suddenly some of that changes or a lot of that changes, whether it's because they intentionally don't want to keep those promises or because they have roadblocks once they get in the legislature. I think it's better for a representative to keep in contact with their constituents as they go along and use them to make those decisions with each other. A lot of that comes from just being in the community and keeping in contact. And you'll notice that candidates a lot, especially if anybody's watched some 5 minutes of TV, you'll see all the commercials from senatorial candidates, and they like to talk about Iowa values and common sense. And I have a hard time believing that they've got any, because common sense requires that we're willing to talk with each other, and that requires using words that mean the same thing. And if you've sat in a legislature, whether at the state or federal level, you'll notice that they might be using the same words, but they have a very different meaning. And if we can't agree even on the meaning of words anymore, then we have a hard time finding the common sense within us all. So I think that's important to find, and that's how we get to good government.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you both, gentlemen. Appreciate your time. Glad you finally got here, Larry. And so thank you guys for staying. And I guess we'll just close. Tuesday is the election, and I urge you all to vote.
It's making a racket.